I've professionally been an entrepreneur for many years, and I've been part of starting a little more than 20 companies by now. And once you've done something a lot of times, you start seeing patterns. And one of the patterns that I've been seeing is that it's not uncommon that once you start a company as a founder, you have a purpose. You have an idea of why you're starting this company, and it's not necessarily just to make money. It's usually, in my experience at least, something else that's driving you, and then you can get paid for it, and that's great. But what I've been seeing is that a lot of the times it's easy to lose track of that purpose once the company starts growing and you have a lot of employees and you're making tons of money, or you get investors and more stakeholders into the thing. It can be quite challenging to kind of protect that purpose. So for me, it's partly been about how can I kind of honor a purpose long term and even protect it legally in some way, even though other stakeholders are coming into the mix. So that's one of the two main reasons why I started exploring this with you, and why the current version of the RCO came to be. And then the other for me is I spent quite a few years now on a fairly deep spiritual journey and a shamanic path. So I'm exploring shamanic traditions and humans' relationships to the rest of nature, and just looking at how does the rest of nature actually function. And what if we look at a company not as a machine, but as a living thing, as an organism that is born and is kind of sprouting up into the world and then matures and then actually dies. It's not this infinite thing that just expands forever. And that kind of simpler perspective of looking at it as a living thing has been kind of the other main pillar for me in this exploration. So hopefully that gives you an idea of why you and I have been exploring this, and then I'm going to invite you to talk a bit about the RCO and what it stands for. Maybe we should say what it stands for. It's not written anywhere.
No, actually it's not. It's too long, too many long words. It doesn't fit on. So it's kind of playfully, we were playing with these words, and then we talked about the regenerative community organism. That's the RCO. And it's like, it was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, and then it kind of stuck because it's a good acronym. What it is, it's these three things that seem to be kind of relating to one another in an interesting way. And one of the aspects has been, we've talked a lot about already around the purpose of something. And so what we're proposing is that we need to come together and make an agreement about what we're trying to do here. And that's documented in a source code, in a constitution, or something like that. But it's something that we make explicit, and then in the beginning, when we were working with that, we started with all these sort of control mechanisms, and then we have to do that, and this is the process for this, and this is the sort of mapping everything out and like living really in the future. And I think it was Sanna who asked me in at one of our walks, and she's like, "What are you trying to control? Like, why do you need to control so much?" And so it is a constitution, but it's really something that we're trying to keep as loose as possible, with the room for, if you will, like life, to shape this thing and for it to go where it needs to go. But the source code is a really sort of fundamental pillar. It's like the horizon that we're looking at together. And then we have these two entities. And this is a company, which is a profit-making company. I think as much as sort of critique that I can do, give the company and like where we are as a result of companies, it's also this wonderful, wonderful sort of focal point for us to do things together, to gather resources together. And it's like when you work in a company that's working, it's great, it's so exciting. And as I'm learning, as I'm growing older, there are also other ways or other logics or other personalities that are available. And so I'm sure some of you are engaged with different associations, non-profit associations. And so how you show up in a company and how you show up in a non-profit association, those are quite different. And in a way you could simplify and say, like, maybe the company is sort of the head and the hands, and the association is the heart. But there's more of a relational dynamic that I see. There are other things that take sort of center stage that are sort of the most present thing. And this seems to be really sort of people are being pulled in not by making money, but making a change or trying to do something. Or it's a different feeling to when you're in an association. And so what we've done is just to take these two and to connect them to one another. And this is really, there's another thinker and a mentor for us who's been extremely important in this journey, which is Hans Hassle, and his work around the compensation. And this is a compensation, basically. That's the center point for the work that we've been doing. And here, there's a shared ownership. I'm not going to go into it. There's transparency. There is some shared governance. There is these are drawn as equal. I would say that the association is actually probably leveled a little bit above the company. The company comes into relationship to the association. Another thing that's really cool that we're finding out is that when we do it in this way, we can also see that an association can follow a purpose, but a purpose doesn't have one single business connected to it, but rather we can connect like multiple companies to the same association, and we can support one another. We can think, I'll talk about a meadow soon, but we can think more about it as an ecosystem, as a commitment to building an ecosystem towards something that we believe is important in the world. So we have the source code, we have this ongoing conversation between two different sort of logics. One which is, I want to do things, this is where we should go, let's move. And another which is more like, how are we doing? What is the relational aspects of this? It's a different way of being in the world. That's what we're proposing anyways. And then we have the third aspect of this is sort of coming back to the life cycle, coming back to what you were saying about the organism as a living thing. That organizations have different needs over time. So what if organizations evolve? So let's just like to help us think, let's think about the meadow. And there's a new species that comes into the meadow. Initially, as it comes into the meadow, it's going to have to grow and multiply and probably expand pretty fast. It makes sense to have some resilience, to have some staying power. Eventually, I mean, to go, like, you might start degrading the soil quality if you have too much of one species, or there might be other consequences of being too many. So there's like a self-regulation mechanism in nature. So here we're saying, okay, we as a company, we might have grown enough. The radical concept in business of enough, right? And so maybe we can start distributing resources. Maybe there's other ways that we can support what we need to do next. So what if we can sort of branch this out and share resources in this ecosystem towards this, well, the source code, towards what we're trying to achieve. And then there might be a succession. I'm not going to talk so much about that, but there are mechanisms for doing that. Maybe the company needs to become part of the association. Maybe the company needs to go to someone else and live in a different context. Get married off to someone else, if we sort of, yeah. And then eventually we're proposing this, which I think is also central, that a lot of, if you read sort of what's the problem with companies is this going concern, this assumption that these things will be there forever and that we can just keep pouring resources into them and they will keep being relevant. And we're proposing that that doesn't have to be the case. There are all these like mystic traditions where you build schools and after 5 years you have to take down the whole school and then you have to rebuild it again. And you're still building a new school, but just to take it down and rebuild it, that process changes something. And so you're responding more to your context. So it's a contextual way of thinking and it's really around, so there are mechanisms for this dying and refertilizing. And then of course, all the resources that are here, they can be reapplied or redirected into something new, potentially, if it's relevant. So I would say like those are the three main moves. It's like the source code, that aspect's really important. Like what are we actually looking at? Let's put some effort into thinking about what are we trying to achieve here? What is work for, if you will? The second part is this conversation between these two entities. And the compensation there is an excellent model for doing that. It's an association, and then of course this association is done, like it's by people, and it could get corrupted, and it could be like, there can happen a million things. We don't have control of the association, but it's the people that are central in an association, and then you have the company, which is a different logic then. It's like an action-oriented logic. And then we have this life cycle, this evolution of things. And we have, I'll show you the web page in a minute, and there's like proposals for how one can do this, and like how you can work with legal instruments that are allowed today, that you can use today, that are it seems to be even fine. Even tax lawyers seem to be okay with what we're proposing. So it's like there are some directions where you can go and take a look at, but that's not for here for now. So there's more to be explored on the web page, I would say.
And it's live. There is an RCO in Sweden.
Yeah.
That should be mentioned. So we think this works. Hopefully, nobody stopped us yet.
Yeah, exactly.